Okay, so let's begin. And like we discussed last time, today's session is going to be something very similar to that, not very different. And I guess since I've been recording these sessions, most students prefer to watch the recording rather than attending the live session. Uh, but that's fine. So what I'll also do is, I guess in the past week I have sent each of you a message asking when are your visa dates, and most of you have replied. If someone has not, then maybe just reply to my message so that before your visa, I will connect with you individually, maybe 2-3 days before your visa, so that we can discuss answers to your visas, maybe specific questions that you may have about the interview on a one-to-one basis. So I'll be connecting with each of you on a one-to-one basis as well. In today's session, let me just talk about how the visa interview goes, what things you need, what documents you need, or what documents you don't need. I'll rather focus on that. And in general, what questions would a visa officer ask you? And what questions are generally expected during the visa interview, or what is expected during the visa interview, and how do you go about answering? Also, on the 2nd of June, there is a webinar conducted by the US Consulate on visa interviews. I'll be sending out, I just got the notification yesterday from someone. So I'll be sending out the link to that. If you can do attend that webinar as well, that is going to be held on the Friday, I think at 6 p.m. I'll send out the details after this webinar on WhatsApp, and if you can, definitely attend that as well. It's a free webinar. There's nothing really you have to pay for it. So something that you can take advantage of. Okay. So coming to the visa interview part, this is something that this question, what documents should I carry during the interview is something which is being very commonly asked, and most of the WhatsApp messages that I get from you, or most of you, are asking about some documents that you need to carry. You guys hear from friends or someone else that they are preparing so and so document. So asking whether CA certificates are required, or someone told me that property evaluations are also required, or should I prepare an affidavit? And these kind of questions get asked too often. So let me again clarify a few things. The US visa, as I mentioned earlier also, and I have mentioned this in my videos as well, that is not based on any documents. That is, US visa officers do not make their decision based on the documents you provide. They do not even ask for any documents. So what the US visa works a little different from some of the other visas, other country visas. Other country visas, most of them, in fact, UK, if you look at Canada or some of the European visas, they are only based on documents. That is, you don't have an interview, and you have to upload and submit all your documents online. And that is when the visa officer makes a decision based on the document. So they have a very strict or very straightforward clarification on what documents are accepted and what documents are not, and what is required. But when it comes to US visas follow a very different method. They are not, this is not a document based process. This is more of a very interpersonal based process. And so what happens is that when things are very vague and ambiguous, that is, there is no definite list of documents that the consulate provides saying that this is what is accepted and this is what is not. Because things are very ambiguous and because things are vague, a lot of misinformation spread among students. Some of it is done intentionally because visa coaching, that is US visa coaching, is a big business in India. And this business thrives on FOMO. I hope you understand what FOMO is. It's like the fear of missing out. So only when you can create fear among someone's mind, you can try to sell them something that they really don't need. That is how this business works. And a lot of people, consultants, friends, family, would tell you that you need these documents because they had prepared these documents. Sometimes, what happens is also that most of these documents that would be prepared by students are going to be actually prepared by parents. So sometimes you might have some friends or family people in the family who might have done this for their sons and daughters, and now the sons and daughters are in the US, and they might tell your parents that when my son and daughter went for the visa last year or the year before, I had prepared so and so such and such a list of documents, and then your parents would ask you, why are you not doing that? Or that would create a panic amongst you. Some of your classmates, friends, colleagues, and all would be preparing a big list of documents. But let me again clarify that none of these documents are required. Documents which are definitely not required are CA certificates or anything issued by a CA. The property valuations, you don't need to get any document related to your properties, or even you don't even need to get your agreements or whatever documents you have related to your properties. Absolutely not required. Don't get gold valuations and any of those kind of documents. You don't need any affidavits from your parents or anybody for that matter. So don't waste time preparing affidavits on stamp papers and getting them all ready. So these documents are definitely not required. Visa officers are not going to accept these documents even in case they ask you for a document, right? So the visa guidelines are very clear that visa officers will not accept or any document which is specifically prepared for the sake of the visa. And let me clarify this point again. Like for instance, if today I ask you, how much money do you have in your bank? How would you actually find that information? There are basically two ways. I mean, of course, you can go to an ATM and check in the ATM, or you could go to your online banking account either through your phone or whatever net banking on your laptop, and log in and find out. Of course, there are other ways also, but because you are not allowed to carry electronic items inside, so you can't actually just pull that information off your phone and show it to your visa officer. The only thing you will have to carry is printouts. So what you need or what you can carry are printouts of your maybe account statements, and by account statements in the sense the ones that are the transaction statements that are generated online. So you can log into your net banking account, prepare, just put in a query that you want a statement of say maybe past 15 days, 1 month, or whatever it is. Even 1 month is more than sufficient. Take a print of that, and that is all is accepted. You If your bank still uses passbooks, I mean, if your parents have accounts in a bank which has this facility of providing passbook, and that is how, and your parents don't use net banking, you could just get your passbook updated from the bank, which will more than sufficient. Similarly, in case of fixed deposits, if you have fixed deposit receipts that are issued to you on paper by the bank, you could carry those or photocopies of those. If you can access your fixed deposit summary online, you could just carry a print of your fixed deposit summary online. Similarly, demat account statements, PPF accounts, whatever. If you have printed statements of those, you can carry those. If you can access them online, a print of it is also sufficient. So you don't have to prepare any extra document, or you don't have to go to the bank and ask them for any document that is required, that has been specially issued for the sake of your visa. Any document that is issued for the sake of the visa is not going to be accepted, and this is again in a very rare chance that the visa officer decides to ask you for a specific document. Even if you don't have any document, absolutely fine. You can tell the visa officer, I don't have this particular document. Generally, they don't bother. And in the worst case, right, a visa is not going to be refused because you don't have a document. Let's say you don't have a document. The visa officer says, okay, show me your online statement. And you say, I don't have it. What the visa officer is going to do is the visa officer is going to put your visa on hold, and they will give you what is one of the slips is called as the 221G, which will say that, okay, you take this, go home, and there will be an email ID mentioned on that, and they would tell you that you will have to mail your document whichever is asked. They'll write on it what documents are required on the specific address. They will review it. Once you do that, within a week or so, they will review those documents and then make a decision on your visa. So just because you don't have a particular document is not going to be a reason for rejection. And this is again, I would insist on it. So don't stress yourself out too much preparing for a particular document, or don't prepare a list of documents that you have to carry, or and then start collecting all those documents. Documents are not required for the US visa. Um, and decisions on visas are not going to be on the basis of your documents. These are very two important things that you need to remember. Okay. Similarly, when you actually appear for the visa interview, of course, before we go into that, another question that most of the students have is, what are the mandatory documents? Now, I'll also send you a WhatsApp message on this. But as far as the OFC is concerned, right, there are only three documents that are required. The first is your passport. The second is a confirmation of your DS 160 that you get after submitting your DS 160. And the third thing is your visa appointment letter, which says that your visa appointment is on so and so date. I mean, your OFC or the VSC appointment is on so and so date, and the visa appointment is on so and so date. Now, that letter generally gets sent to you by email, so you could carry a print of that email. Or when you book your visa appointment, you see it on your screen, so you can log in and also download that. Just remember that this letter uh, generally runs into 2 pages or 3 pages, and on the second or third page there is a barcode that gets printed on it. So make sure that you print the entire letter with the barcode, because when you go to the US visa office or the VSC OFC appointment, they would actually be scanning the barcode. So they need to know this barcode. Otherwise, they will not be able to, probably if the barcode is missing, that is, if you print only the first page or only the appointment letter which doesn't have the barcode, then that would it would be difficult for them to find out whether your appointment is there. So they need to scan that barcode. So make sure you print the entire letter. So these are the only three documents that are required. During the OFC, what happens is, the once you are done with your fingerprint and all that, they would stamp your DS 160 confirmation page saying that the OFC was done on whatever date it was done. And when you go for your visa, you need to carry again your passport, the stamped version of the DS 160 form, the same your appointment letter which has the barcode on it. And in addition to this, you will need to carry your I-20 and a confirmation of your service payment. So these are the 5 documents that you need to carry when you actually go to your for your visa interview. As far as the I-20 is concerned, you will have to sign the I-20, put any date. The date can be any date that is from the time the I-20 was issued till the time your visa, any date in between. You could put today's date, you could put the day of your visa, so any date is fine. And you just have to write your name, signature, and your the date. There is a section below which is only when you are under 18, and most of you, I mean, not most of you, all of you are not under 18. So you just ignore that section. You don't have to get your parent's signature or address or any details there. So the only information you need is your only thing that you need to fill on the DS1 on the I-20 is your signature, the date, and your name. Also, on the second or third page of your I-20, there is information about you'll find some things written like employment information and all that. Don't fill that. That is not your current employment. That is basically what you will have to fill, or the school will update it at a much later in stage once you get your internships and all those things. So you don't have to fill anything on the second or third page of your I-20. Okay, so this is what is required as in terms of the documents that are required for the visa. Once again, don't waste your time, or don't put in any efforts in collecting or gathering any extra documents. As far as your academic documents are required, again, academic documents are actually not required for the visa, but just for the sake of carrying something, you can carry your bachelor's mark sheets, a degree certificate if you have one. If you're still in college and still in final year, and you don't have your 7th sem or 8th semester or whichever degree is mark sheets, absolutely fine. Whatever mark sheets you have, carry those. If you have given your GRE and TOEFL or IELTS, carry a print of your GRE and TOEFL scorecard. It can be your latest scorecard. It could be whichever scorecard you want to tell the visa officer in case they ask you about your GRE and TOEFL scores. So any scorecard that you want to tell them about, you can carry that. These are the, as far as your academic documents are concerned, these are the only documents. Your 10th mark sheets, 12th mark sheets are all not required. SOPs, LORs, resumes, again, not required. So, uh, don't really worry about carrying all those documents. You don't need to carry all your, details about your applications. Don't need to carry your admits and reject letters, and all these documents are again not required. You still need to have information about your admits and rejects, but documents are not required. Okay, now the visa is based on two factors. One is, the first and the most important factor is, how well prepared are you in terms of pursuing your masters. That is, how well do you understand what is going to be taught to you in your masters? Why do you want to do your masters? What is it that you want to learn during your masters? The visa officer is going to ask you questions around these topics. They are going to assess how did you actually go about applying, how did you go about selecting your universities, why have you decided to pursue your masters at this university, and so on. And the second point, which is the lesser important one, is how do you plan to pay for your education. So your entire focus, or when it comes to preparing for the visa interview as such, you just have to prepare for these two topics. The first is, why do you want to do a masters, why at this particular university, and how did you go about selecting this university, and if you have multiple admits, then why have you chosen this university over the remaining universities. And the second point is, how do you plan to pay for your masters. So when it comes to focusing on, or when it comes to answering questions about why do you want to apply to this university, or why have you chosen this particular university, one very important thing is that your answers should be very personalized. And keep this in mind, that don't give generic answers. Try to customize your answers which would tell them your story. Visa officers would like to hear your thoughts and not a very standard scripted answer that most students try to give, because someone has written that answer somewhere on, maybe on a WhatsApp group or Telegram group, and circulated that over emails or however you have got it. So don't try to give those very scripted answers. Don't try to write down answers also. I would very strongly recommend that don't write down answers. Just remember highlighting points that you need to talk about. Like, if for example, if someone talks about if a visa officer asks you, or if for that matter anybody, let it be any person, would ask you, why do you want to go to this particular university, you should tell them about what courses at the university did you like or do you like, what research areas are you interested in, what topics do you plan to study at that university, and how did you develop that interest. Was it something in line with your academic work that you did, or was it something that is going to help you advance some of the skills that you've learned at work. So try to bring in these factors and tell the visa officer why you have decided to apply to this university, or why have you decided to join this particular university. You can talk about the research happening at that university, if you are actually going for a research based program. If not, then you don't have to talk about the research. What faculty profiles did you check out, and which faculties do you like, and which courses do you plan to actually take at the university. Again, you need not have to go in detail, and you again don't have to go to the point where you plan out your entire master's journey in advance, but at least as of today, if you think, if someone asks you what do you plan to study at this particular program, you will have some idea. Okay, these are courses that I plan to take. Obviously, after you go there, after you reach the university, there are going to be a lot of factors based on which your plans that you have decided now may not actually happen, or you may not want that to happen. You might realize that, okay, these courses are better than these, or there are more opportunities if I take a particular course, or you think some faculty is better than the other, and that is why you might want to change your plans. That is all fine, but given the situation today that you are, with the limited information that you have, and your limited information would be access to the universities and programs website, and maybe in case you are in touch with some students who are currently studying there, whatever you think you have decided as of now, that okay, these are the topics that I would study, or these are the topics, or these are the courses that I would take, or I would like to participate in so and so research. Tell the visa officer about that. Uh, Coming to the second part of the interview, and I tell you that this is again the lesser important part, is how do you plan to pay for your education? Now, if you are going to a good university and you have answered the first part of the discussion very well, that is, you have actually, the visa officer is convinced that okay, this student is a serious student. He or she understands why he wants to do a master's. It is very likely that the visa officer will not get into the details of your finances. They would just ask you about why this university, what do you plan to study, and if they feel you have intelligently answered these questions, they would say, okay, thank you for your time, and they would grant you the visa. Uh, but sometimes they do get into the details of the finances, and try to understand that the visa officer does not want to get into the details of your accounts or your balance sheets or your statements. They would be asking you, how do you plan to pay for your education? Or sometimes they'll ask you, who is going to pay for your education? So these are the kind of questions that they will ask you. They will generally not ask you how much money do you have. So try to understand or try to listen to the question carefully, and based on what is asked, try to answer it as based on what the question was. Like if they ask you, how do you plan to pay for your education, or who is going to pay for your education, whatever it is, you will have to tell the visa officer that my parents are going to pay for my education, or I have taken an education loan, or if in your case it's going to be both. You tell the visa officer that I have partly taken an education loan, and partly my parents are also going to pay for my education. So frame an answer which is very suited to the question. Don't try to get into the details of your finances, or okay, I have so much amount in my bank, and those kind of details, unless the visa officer specifically asks you for those details. So when they ask you, how do you plan to pay for your education, give them an overall plan. uh, the mistake that students make is they get too much into the details, and they try to look at the visa from a very accounting point of view. And when I say accounting point of view, what I mean is that they try to, they try to justify their finances a little too much. Uh, Also, they try to say that okay, if my father is going to pay for my education, how much money does my father actually have? If my and they say that okay, if my mother is going to pay for my education, how much money is there in my mother's account? Like sometimes what happens is, in while submitting documents for your I-20 or even in the DS-160 form, you don't have the option of writing all the family members' name there. So maybe sometimes you write father there, or sometimes you write mother there, or whatever you write. Or sometimes maybe for getting the I-20 you have showed an education loan, which is fine. Sometimes you have not shown an education loan, which is also absolutely fine. So students try to justify that okay, this is what I showed during the I-20. So what if the visa officer would cross question me if I say something different? And in that attempt, they try to uh, tell the visa officer what is actually mentioned on the DS-160 or what is mentioned on the I-20, and causing the visa officer to get a little suspicious that you are trying to hide something, or you're not being very open or very clear in your communication. So be very honest about whatever your plans are. Don't get into too much details. So, and don't approach the visa interview as if this is going to be a cross questioning thing, like as if you have done something wrong and you don't want the visa officer to find out. Don't let that not be your approach. Often I have seen that students are always trying to hide something which is really not required to be hidden, or trying to justify something when there is nothing wrong in what you are saying. Like for example, if the visa officer asks how much is your father's income, or how much do your parents earn, and some students would say my father's income is say 8 lakhs, but he also has savings that he has saved from all his years, kind of thing. As if you are trying to justify the fact that 8 lakhs is less, and that is why you are trying to give that explanation that although his income is 8 lakhs per year, he has savings of so and so amount that he has saved all over the year, or saying about we have ancestral property that is worth 1 crore and all that kind of justifications. So don't try to give such justifications unless the visa officer asks you follow-up questions. And this is especially about the finances kind of thing. Don't worry too much about the finances. Generally, if you have come to the point where you are actually facing a visa interview, the visa officer is not going to refuse your uh, visa on the basis of finances, because you have until this moment, I mean from the time you started your journey of deciding to apply for your masters, you worked on your GRE, TOEFL, IELTS, or whichever exams you gave, you spent money on your application, you have spent money on the visa, some of you have also paid deposits to the universities. So given all this, visa officers know that only when you are actually serious about your whole education, you have come to this point. So once they are convinced that, okay, yes, this student is serious about the education, they also know that this student has the capability to pay, or this student has made some arrangements of pay. Nobody comes to this point without having a proper plan of pay. It is just that, sometimes you students are not able to explain that plan because they always feel that whatever they are doing is wrong, or whatever they try to just over justify themselves. So don't make that mistake. Be very honest about whatever is your situation. And like I said, don't get into the details of how much money your father has, how much money your mother has, how much is your money in your personal account. When you talk about it as a whole. Uh, when I discuss this with you individually, I will, I'll probably, I will be able to discuss this better with you because I'll know exactly what your situation is. And when I have this one-on-one session with you in the coming weeks, or whenever your visas are a few days before your visa, we'll discuss this in detail. So, any questions that you have? No questions today? Anything related to the visas? I mean, visa dates are currently not open. I mean, those who have already booked their dates, good. If you haven't, don't worry about it. They keep opening periodically. Uh, mm, Keep checking regularly. Maybe once or twice a day you can check. And when they open, they will be open for a few days. So it's not that they are going to be you are going to run out of visa date. So don't panic that you are not getting a date. There is no hurry in booking the visa date. You can start booking your flight tickets in case you want to. Many students wait for the visa to book your flight tickets, but just that the rates keep going higher. If you're getting a good deal, I would say just book your flight tickets.
I had a question.
Yeah,
Do
sorry.
they ask you? So I have work ex like a significant amount. So do they ask you questions about like the technical work you do? Like at least I read in a PDF again from WhatsApp only,
Mhm.
but they were asking like, what's the difference between this programming language and all? Like, is that something I should be
Yeah, yeah,
preparing
they
for?
can see, they can ask you, and the point is the visa officer can ask you anything, um,
Okay,
but they don't know the answer. Correct.
right.
So because to become a visa officer, generally most of them come from either a maybe sociology background, political science background, and those kind of liberal arts. I mean, if you look at a career, if you want to become a visa officer in the US, those are the kind of students actually end up becoming visa officers when they end up working for the consulates and all that. So they don't come from a engineering or a technical background. um, it's not like in India where engineers do any job after that. So generally the visa officer will not be technically that sound. And the only reason why they ask you is to understand whether you understand what you are talking about. Right. So the question, so it will also depend on what your earlier question was. If you tell them that, okay, I'm interested in say something related to analytics, and I have been working on so and so technologies. They can ask you what is the difference between those, just out of curiosity. Sometimes it would be just out of just to understand whether you really understand what you're talking about. So if you can answer if you know your stuff, I think you're good to go. Right. So also
Yeah.
in the visa, right? Also, what happens is generally, if you see in the visa, a lot depends on how you answer rather than what you answer. So, and this is where the problem lies, especially because most of the students who get their visa, they then post their experiences on maybe a Telegram or a WhatsApp group or wherever they post. So there they only write what they said. They don't. It is very difficult for them, or sometimes they won't even tell you how they said it. Right.
Mm.
So sometimes you by just looking at that question, so you feel that okay, what if the visa officer asks me this? Sometimes it also would depend on what was said earlier, how you said it, and all those factors. So, but as far as you don't have to prepare anything technically specifically for the visa, but yes, if you say something, you should be aware of
Okay. Another thing again, like a question, like I saw at least, I'm not sure if they can ask this, but do they ask you about like your flights and all, like you booked it, and should you say yes to that? I don't know if they
it. I
will
would
ask
say
that, but
all these things you should be honest. I mean, nobody is going to reject your visa because you have booked a flight, or nobody is
okay,
going to reject your visa because you have not booked a flight. Right?
okay,
See,
yeah.
sometimes
On
what happens
the
is, I mean, if you look
form,
at it
that's all.
from the visa officer's point of view, right? It is they have to do for you. This is an only interview, but visa officer has to interview 100 people in a span of 2-3 hours. It gets a little boring for them. It sometimes and sometimes by looking at your profile, by asking the first few questions, they are kind of almost certain that okay, yes, this student deserves a visa, right? But they also have to do some procedural work there, like they have to verify whether your I-20 is genuine, service fees are paid, and all that. They have to fill in some information on their system, and that takes time. I mean, time in the sense sometimes systems are slow. The next page may not come in. On an average, it takes something like about a minute or so for the visa officer to enter information on in their system. So while talking to him, they will be continuously typing or putting in some keying in some information. So sometimes just to have conversation, they can ask you anything. So
Okay.
it is not that okay, yes, if you have booked your flight. So I would say these things, you should generally not lie about, because the moment you start lying about something, you unnecessarily will become too conscious about these. So if you have booked a flight, you can tell them that yes. Sometimes out of curiosity, like for example, if you tell us a friend asks you, have you booked your flight? Um, you will say yes, हाँ I booked my flight, and this person will say, अरे अभी visa भी नहीं हुआ, flight क्यों book कर लिया? Right? So you will
Mm.
obviously explain, right? अरे deals are cheaper. I mean, I got a cheap deal. That's why I booked it. So same thing if the visa officer asks, uh, you can tell the visa officer, yeah, I got a really good deal. So I booked it. Those flight tickets where the rates were going up on a daily basis. I thought it was a good deal. I would rather take the chance and book the visa. I mean, book the flight ticket. If you haven't
Okay.
booked it, you tell the visa officer, no, I haven't booked it. I'm just looking at tickets. Maybe in a day or two, I'll go ahead and book the flight. So whatever is your story. Similarly, the case with apartments. If you have booked an apartment, if you find a good deal and you want to confirm on it, go ahead and do that. If the visa officer asks, say that yes, I have looked at some apartments, I have also almost finalized on one, or I have finalized on one, or you have not finalized on one. Whatever is your real story, you can actually tell them about it. So these things don't really matter.
Okay. Also for funding, I know like the documents, obviously, as you said, they won't necessarily ask, but like for me at least, I plan on um using the loan that's co-signed with my parents plus my savings, right? But again, I've heard rumors that it should not look like I am the one funding my education. Like it should be my parents funding it. So should I tell them that I'm actually going to use my dad's savings instead of like saying that I have my savings to cover?
Not really. I mean, whatever is, it doesn't matter as long as there is sufficient funds available with you and through the loan, right?
Yeah.
It is good. Like sometimes, I mean, for some students, 100% of the funding is going to come from a loan. Parents are not even going to be involved in it. That is also
Mm.
fine as long as. So of course, you can't have a 25 lakh loan and say my entire funding is going to come from my loan, when on an average the cost of your education is going to be 50 lakhs.
Yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
I meant, sorry, I just want to clarify that. Like my education is covered by the loan, but like staying expenses covered by my own money, like savings account, right?
yeah,
So
yeah. So you can talk about it. I mean, you can tell the visa
okay.
officer that I have a education loan and I have some savings of my own which I have saved over the past how many years? What, 3-4 years that you have been working? I have saved some
Yeah.
money. So between that, I think that should be sufficient enough to cover my entire cost of my cost and living tuition and living cost of my education.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. If that is your story, then that is what you should tell the visa officer.
Okay.
So as long as, see, the point is, as long as you are convinced, right, that the amount of money that you have between the loan and your savings is sufficient enough to cover your educational cost, everything is good. If you are doubtful about that, then there is a problem. So I think Siddharth has a question here that
Yes,
in that,
sir.
yeah, DS 160 you have mentioned the address as the college address, but now you have found roommates, so I'll be living off campus. So where? So you can tell I'll be living off campus. See, the college address is, even if you are living on campus, that is not going to be the address you will live in. Right? That is the university office address. You can't go and stay in the office. The
Yes, sir.
university dormitories will have a different address altogether. Even if you go with the university housing, it is definitely not going to be the address that you have put on the DS 160. Right? And these things don't matter. Right?
Yes, sir.
Because again, see, there are instructions on how to fill the DS 160, and there it is clearly mentioned that if you are a student, then you have to mention the university address if you don't have any other address.
Yes, sir.
See, the DS 160 form is a common form for all non-immigrant visas. Like if you probably apply for a tourist visa, if you apply for a business visa, or any non-immigrant visa, you have to fill only one form, and that is the DS 160 form. So the DS 160 form is actually not very customized only for students. Okay, when you say student, the only section that changes in the DS 160 is there is a last section that comes as the service section, where it asks you for the university name and I-20 details. Uh, but if you are basically, someone is applying for a tourist visa, or someone is applying for a business visa, or someone is applying for a medical visa, or whatever visa you apply, you have to fill the same form, and all the sections in the form are exactly the same. So the form is not exactly like, so, and that is why this, where will you stay in the US? If you are going as a tourist, you will put in your hotel address. There are instructions there that if you, so don't worry about what address you put in there. Once you actually reach the university, and you will have to, once you do your orientation, you will have to put in your actual address. You will have to mention your actual address at the international students office. But as far as DS 160 is concerned, don't worry about changing the address. Again, don't worry that the visa officer is going to ask you, here you have put in the university address, but now you tell me that I booked a apartment. All those things really don't matter.
जैसा
Yeah, Disha, yeah, sorry. Neeraj, go ahead. Neeraj, you were saying something.
yeah, so you've mentioned that the finance part should not sound like accounting, right? So when the visa officer asks that who is going to sponsor for your education, so at this point of time, should we just say that I'm going to self-sponsor my education through a loan and my savings? Is that fine, or
Yeah,
should I
just say
go ahead?
I'm going to, just say I have availed an education loan, and
Mhm.
additionally I have some savings of my own, which is going to help me pay for my education.
I mean, that's it, right? Let's not go into the amount of like a sanctioned loan and the savings, right? When they ask, then only.
Like they get into the details of it and tell them how much is your loan. Whatever Prodigy, Empower, whichever you have finalized on. Tell them
Okay.
that I have so and so loan, and that is the amount that is going to pay for my education.
Okay. Okay. And Jessica, should we also get very much familiar with the CPT, OPT, and other details also, right? I mean, with ask question on that as well.
They don't, but there is nothing much to be familiar with the CPT and OPT. I'll briefly
Okay.
explain that. See, CPT is something that CPT is a certificate which is kind of issued by the university only. And CPT is a provision that allows you to work during your summer. So for the CPT, you have to finish 2 semesters. That is, you finish the fall and the spring semester, and then in the summer you are allowed to do an internship. Okay, so that is what a CPT is. OPT is a document, or rather a card, which is like a work authorization card, which you will apply before you graduate, and you will have to apply it to the government, and the government will issue a 1-year OPT, which allows you to work in the US for 1 year. if you are by the end of that year, if you have a job which is paying you, I mean a paid job, unpaid jobs you can't apply for an extension. So if you have a paid job at the end of the first year, and again your degree is a STEM degree, you can apply for a extension of the OPT for 2 more years. So which effectively gives you a 3-year OPT. That is all about the OPT and CPT.
Yeah. So just any other thing related to visa regulations or any of the parameters, right? We should be aware instead of the purpose of it, like the university, what courses, why this course, plus finance part. Any of the primary question we should be ready with.
Right. So those are the only things: why this course, why this university, and who is going to pay for your education. Okay.
Correct. So just in my case, it will be through a loan letter and my savings, right? So there is no need to bring my parents' savings or anything, right?
Not required.
Because I mean the I-20 states amount around 38K, but my loan is around 60K USD plus my savings are also there, so it's fine, right?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
So Atisha has a question here. 1 minute. Yeah. So it says, if I mentioned during my interview that post my master's I plan to work in a company in which my father works, will it reflect poorly on me during the interview? So Atisha, I mean, very honestly, I don't know what kind of. Atisha, are you here?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I don't know what exactly or which company does your father work? Is it like he owns the
He
company
works
or?
in Reliance Jio.
Okay. Oh, okay. So I mean, do you have a job offer from that company?
Not yet. Actually, I don't plan to do that exactly, but just to say that.
No. So you can say basically you can ideally. My recommendation would be, say, if you want to work in a telecom or some related. When you talk about what kind of job that you want to do, I would say talk about the kind of role that you want to play. In terms of after your masters, what kind of a job would you like to do, rather than mentioning the company that you would like to work in. 1 minute. So rather and again, where would be, so you can mention that one of the options that you are considering is with Reliance Jio, because your father works there, but there are definitely other options that you would consider when you actually start your job. So you
Yes.
can mention that yes, one of the options that you are would like to consider is Reliance Jio, because your father works there and that would help you get an interview much faster at the company. But then there are other opportunities also that you would consider, because the job role is going to be important. If your father's company at that point may not have the job role that really fits your profile and your level of education, then you may not want to do that. But so tell them about the kind of job role that you prefer rather than the company name.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
So Priya has a very interesting question, and I know many students are a little skeptical about this, saying that if I tell the visa officer that I'm paying that education loan is going to finance my education, they would ask me how do you plan to repay the loan. So see, the point is that Priya, and not only Priya, everybody else. See, anybody who takes an education loan, right? Whether you take it for any education, you will have to repay it. And how do you repay? Is that you will, after you get a job, after you, graduate from your program, you will get a job and you will start earning and repay the education loan. Now, whether the job is in India, whether the job is in US or wherever it is, you will have to repay the education loan. So, in most cases, like most banks or financial institutions that give you an education loan, you're, you have a moratorium period of 2 years during which you don't have to pay anything, and after that, you have a period of 7 to 15 years, depending on your loan, during which you have to pay for your education. Generally, if it is say a 50 lakh loan, your payments might come to somewhere around 40 to 50,000 per annum. Per month is the kind of payments that you will have to make for your education. Now, after you do your masters, let's assume that you have to come back to India for your job. You should be expecting a salary of somewhere anywhere between 6 to 8 lakhs, which should be enough to pay off your education loan, and of course, there should be some money left for your own expenses also. So, in case the visa officer asks you what kind of, I mean, whether you would, whether what, see, basically they might ask you what do you plan to do after your education. In that case, the first thing that you will have to tell them is the kind of job that you plan to do. Again, here talk in more in terms of your career rather than the location. So tell them that after I finish, maybe I graduate with a degree in computer science, or I graduate with a degree in MIS or mechanical engineering, or whatever is your bachelor's degree in. Tell them the kind of job profile that you would be looking at. Maybe as a data scientist, or as a production engineer, or maybe a mechanical design engineer, or whatever it is. If you can talk a little bit about the industry that you plan to work on, or the technologies that you work on, that you would like to work on rather, that is also going to be helpful. In case the visa officer does ask specifically, do you plan to look for a job in India or in the US, or do you plan to want to pursue your long-term career in India or in the US? You will have to then tell them that yes, in the long term I plan to come back to India, right? So even if you have to come back to India immediately, the kind of salaries that you would tell the visa officer that you would get should be sufficient enough to pay off your education loan. So that is what the visa, you will have to tell the visa officer that yes, if I come back to India, these are the kind of salaries that I'm expecting, and that should be sufficient enough to pay off my education loan. Now, when you give those numbers, now if it generally the visa officer will not get into all those details, but in case you have to give some numbers on what kind of salaries that you are expecting, uh, definitely give them a number which is more than your loan payment. Say if your loan payment is 40,000, obviously you should talk about a salary of at least 60 to 70,000 per month. So do your annual calculation and say I'll be getting 8 lakhs per month. So that is the kind of salary I'm expecting, because I have seen some students who have come back to India, and those are the kind of salaries that they get in the industry that I am interested in, or for the job role that I'm interested in. So that is what you will have to tell the visa officer. So you will have to explain to the visa officer that yes, after I return back, the amount of salary that I'll get is going to be sufficient enough to cover my education loan. This is again in case the visa officer gets into all these details. Most likely they will not. But for anybody, I mean anybody who is taking an education loan will be paying off that education loan by earning. If you get a job in the US during your OPT, obviously that money will also be helping you cover up the education loan. Again, visa officers are not going to think that okay, say student X is paid, I mean is going to be funded by his parents, and student Y is going to be paying through an education loan. So that doesn't mean that the student who has an education loan will definitely work in the US, and a student who is paid, I mean who's sponsored by his or her parents, will come back to India because that person doesn't have any education. So that is not how visa officers are going to think. And just to clarify on those points, right? Anybody who is going to study in the US, there is a very high possibility that they would work in the US, or they would at least during the OPT try to find employment in the US. Two things here. First thing, it is legal to do that. So you don't have to really worry about it. The OPT has been designed for you to gain practical experience so that it can help you enhance your learning. Now, this is where this is what you need to understand about the OPT, that there is a difference between working in the US and there is a difference between working on your OPT. The OPT is not exactly the kind of job that you do to just earn money and live in the US. It is the idea or the objective behind that OPT is to enhance your learning. So even at any point you have to tell the visa officer that yes, I will work on the OPT. Make sure that you just don't say that I will work on the OPT, but tell the visa officer that I will try to find an opportunity on the OPT which will help me enhance the skills that I have learned during my masters. So if I have learned about, say I have learned studied data science, or I have studied maybe mechanical engineering, or I have studied maybe whatever subject, maybe health sciences, say I will try to find a job, or I will try to find an opportunity, maybe some projects or internships that I can do or work on during the OPT that will help me gain some practical experience in these domains. So that is what you will have to tell the visa officer in case the visa officer asks you specifically, do you plan to work on your OPT? Don't just give an answer saying, yes, I plan to work in the US, and don't just flatly refuse saying that I don't plan to use my OPT. Right? Both don't sound very convincing. Working in the US is like, telling the visa officer that you plan to work on the long term, but that which you should not, because your plan is to gain education, gain relevant work experience on your OPT, which will help you enhance your learning and then return back to India. As of now, as far as your visas are concerned, your OPT is just 1 year. The 2 year STEM extension and all are plans that might happen later, but as of now, maybe your plan is to go to the US, study, pursue your masters. If you feel that that OPT, using that OPT is going to help you enhance your learning for 1 year, you would do that and then return back to India. That is what most of you should be. That is the plan that you should have in your mind as of today. So don't worry about talking about education loans, because and here is one more thing which is very important, is that when you say that you are planning to take an education loan, right? Sometimes the visa officer feels a little more assured that okay, yes, this person will not run out of money halfway through his or her education, because a bank or any financial institution will not withdraw your education loan just for no reason. But parents can, family members can. So education loan becomes a very secure way of paying for your education. Visa officers generally always look for, okay, whether this person has a secure source of funds, and that is where education loan comes very handy. Don't try to hide it. Again, if your parents are financially strong, they don't need an education loan, then you don't need to talk about an education loan. But if you're actually taking an education loan, tell the visa officer about it. Any further questions?
Um, I'm not sure. I mean, it's a silly question, but what are you supposed to like wear in the interview? Like, is it supposed to be full formals or like
No, you don't
semi-formals?
need to wear formals. You can wear anything that you are comfortable in.
Okay.
Jeans are okay. T-shirts are also okay. Preferably avoid round neck T-shirts. Any collared T-shirt is also okay. If you want to wear shoes, you can wear. I mean, generally, your sneakers and all that. You don't have to wear very formal shoes. So don't worry about dressing too formally. Look like a student. You are a student. So, but I would definitely not recommend wearing what do you say, blazers and ties and coats and all those kind of attire. Anything that you can classify as business casuals are absolutely fine. Yes, Neeraj, you're saying.
Yeah, just so on the list of documents, you have already mentioned that college admit letter are not required, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, my university has sent me an email for the admit, not any document. So, it's not needed to request for
No, no,
letter.
you don't need. See, most colleges nowadays don't send admit letters also. They just send email. So it's not required. Only I-20 is required.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, yeah. They will not even be asking you for those admit letters and all that. Even for the college that you have been admitted in. बाकी कॉलेज का तो छोड़ ही दो, मतलब not they will not definitely ask, but even for the university that you are actually going to, they will not ask for any admission.
Okay.
And as far as other questions go, right, you don't really need to worry or prepare for any other questions. Sometimes, like I said, just to make conversation, the visa officer can ask you anything. If you know the answer, say yes. If you don't know, they can ask you like about what is the sports team of your college, or what are, maybe if you're going to a city that is a very big city or not a big city? What is popular about that city? Do you know about it? It can be as anything about kind of thing. So if you know about it, say yes. If you don't know, say I don't know. These questions really don't make any impact on your visa decision. So don't worry about it, because what is going to happen is as the visas session would start maybe next week, a lot of information will start coming on student groups, and sometimes some students would say the visa officer asked me this, and students will start panicking, saying that, oh, I need to prepare for this as well. So these questions really don't have any impact on your visa, so don't worry too much about it. Like I said, out of curiosity, if you want to find out more about the university, say if you're someone is going to Chicago, or you're going to, say, maybe San Francisco, or wherever you're going, just out of curiosity, you think, okay, you want to find out what is there in that city, do that. But don't do that just for the sake of the visa. I mean, any information that you have about the city or the place that you're going to is anyway going to help you when you go there. So definitely, I would not say that you should not be watching videos on the city or anything or finding out more, but don't really do it for the sake of the visa. You don't need to.
And just this last 3 months salary slip or any promotion letter or something is not required, right? I also saw
Not really required. See, they can ask you what are you currently doing. You can tell them I'm working at so and so. They might ask you about your current salary. You can tell them that. But again, they will not be asking you about your salary slips and proof for your employment and all.
Okay.
So they'll only be asking you questions, and you only have to give answers. Okay, so with this, what I'll do is we'll end today's session. And as I said, two things. One is I'll be connecting with each of you on a one-to-one basis a few days before your visa. I had sent most of you, in fact, not most of you, in fact, all of you, messages about asking you about your actual visa dates. For those who have booked it, most of you have actually replied to my messages. But if you haven't, just send me a WhatsApp message mentioning your actual visa date whenever you book your visa date, if you haven't booked it yet. And we'll connect on a one-to-one basis, where I'll discuss your individual profiles, your individual finances with you, so that you are a little more comfortable before you actually face the visa interview. Also, as I mentioned earlier, some of you might have missed it, that on this coming Friday, that is on the 2nd of June, there is a webinar that is going to be conducted by the US Consulate on visa interviews. I'll share the links link of that. You need to register for it. It's a free webinar. If you are available on that day, go ahead and register for it. If you register, sometimes you might also receive a recording of that webinar. I would encourage you to attend that as well if you are available, or at least watch the recording in case there is a recording. I'm not sure if there is going to be a recording of it or not. So definitely do that as well. Okay. And if you have any other questions, feel free to connect with me anytime over WhatsApp or over call. Okay, with that, we'll end today's session. Any last questions? Chalo then, bye.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thank you, sir.